Back to our top story today, Rishi Sunak says that he will warn Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to show restraint in his first direct call since the attacks launched by Iran. Here's what he told MPs as they returned from recess yesterday.
We are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed. We want to see calmer heads prevail, and we are directing all our diplomatic efforts to that end. I will also shortly be speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu to express our solidarity with Israel in the face of this attack and to discuss how we can prevent further escalation. All sides must show restraint.
Well, joining us now is my MP, I didn't know this the other day, and former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, said I've unlocked on my door. Good morning, Tobias. How are you?
Well, you let me know where you live and I'll be around there with some leaflets and sign you up without hesitation.
All right, my friend. Do you think I'm letting you know where I live? No. Listen, seriously, let's talk about Sunak's handling of the escalation in the Middle East. I just want to throw something at you, firstly, because you're the expert in all of this. I don't really know much about war, but a week ago on this show, we were talking about how there were creaks appearing for Netanyahu at home. There were people in this country saying, should we be arming Israel and selling weapons? And then David Cameron seemed to flip-flop. What happened over the weekend with these Iranian attacks has solidified not only the Western world back against for Netanyahu, no noise from the Arab world supporting Iran. So quite an interesting moment, to be fair.
No, where the Arab world goes here is so important indeed. I just want to reflect on the introductory comments you made. Some of your viewers were perhaps questioning why on earth we get involved with this. What happens around the world affects us. We've embraced globalization, and if there is conflict, as we saw in Ukraine, it has a knock-on effect on our economy. And if good nations like Britain don't step forward to keep the peace, to keep stability, then there's knock-on consequences. Those vacuums are then filled by bad intentions, and we saw that in the Red Sea with what the Houthis were doing as well. So it takes nations such as us to step forward. And that means clearly more investment in our defense as our world becomes more dangerous. But let's recognize that if we don't step up, then our economy is hit, prosperity is affected, cost of living crisis in the UK goes up. So that's the bigger picture that we're confronting here. But the unequivocal message that we heard from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and indeed others is please, to Israel, show a strategic patience. Do not rush to retaliate. And I'm sure that's what the Prime Minister will say when he speaks to Prime Minister Netanyahu today. There was global sympathy after those terrible Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. But as we've discussed, that progressively evaporated when the consequences of the style of Israel's retaliation then actually led to so much collateral damage to infrastructure, also the prospect of famine, and took us away from getting those hostages out. So it's important that we choose the right course of action this time to prevent further escalation. But I stress, work more cognitively to develop a strategy that not only contains Iran's direct threats, but also dismantles Iran's proxies, which for a couple of decades, we've ignored. The Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, their influence in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, and so forth. We've turned a blind eye to this over the last couple of decades, and now it's all come to a fore. So there's a bigger picture to consider, as well as what's going to happen immediately in the next few days and weeks.
And Tobias, just going back to the weekend, what did you make of Iran's response and their attack against Israel? Do you think that they were reserved, as some people have suggested? And also, second question, what would the UK have done? How would the UK have responded if one of our consulates abroad had been attacked and some generals killed?
Well, there's two aspects to that question. Firstly, is the sovereign territory of what is an embassy or consulate. The Vienna Conventions make it very, very clear that's seen as belonging to the country whose flag is represented. Therefore, the attack that took place in in Damascus, in Syria, was wrong. But that said, the retaliation that we saw from Iran was completely disproportionate. It was also unprecedented in the scale of its attack. And we shouldn't dismiss the fact that Israel has the most comprehensive, world-beating air defense systems in the world that prevented huge collateral damage, but also loss of life. Therefore, we shouldn't dismiss the scale of this attack of what we saw. And it's understandable that there is massive pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu and indeed the war cabinet to respond in some sort of way. That said, we're into a new space here now, because nobody's in full control of where this conflict is going. No single state, no single individual leader. It's important that the West, the Arab nations, and indeed Israel all work together to recognize the wider objective that we need to achieve here, which is limiting Iran's toxic influence across the Middle East. Bearing in mind that the window to do that will be closing, because what sits behind Iran is Russia, and of course, increasingly, what sits behind Russia is China.
And there's that axis that we've talked about. Can I move it home, if that's OK, Tobias? Let's talk about Rishi Sunak. I was saying earlier that there's always a bounce, it seems, when there's a conflict, when everybody grabs the flag. You think of history, Thatcher, all sorts of situations. You've always been honest with us. We'll always be honest with you. Yesterday, a poll rating after what happened in the Commons, and they seem to me to be both statesmanlike, Keir Starmer went up a further 7 points and your leader went down another point. Is it a lost cause? Because what's happening at the moment on the world stage, do you believe that will impact on the Tories' chances at the next election, my friend?
I think the country wants to know that we are in good hands, that the security of Britain is going to be considered as a factor in the election discussions and debates. I hope that we're going to look to have to increase our defence posture. That's absolutely critical. The very first point I made on your programme was this symbiotic relationship between our economy and our security. And if the world's getting more dangerous, we have to then upgrade our security capability, our defence architecture. And we've done well. Britain has led Europe in support for Ukraine. And again, we're one of the first nations to help Israel with this state-on-state attack. But more wider, I would actually say, look at the bigger picture here. It has been a turbulent period in British politics. People still don't know what Labour stands for, but there's been too much blue on blue. There's been the turbulence, the changes of prime ministers and so on. What Rishi Sunak is achieving is taking us into far more calmer political waters. Fiscal responsibility has returned. Inflation was in double figures. It's now heading towards 2%. If we focus on that and then recognize that the economy is now moving in the right direction, we have actually a very, very good story to sell. Unfortunately, too many of the headlines actually take us away from focusing on that and actually then providing scrutiny of what Labour stands for.
Do you believe...
Sorry,
go, Nick. Go.
Speaking of headlines and the economy, Tobias, Liz Truss, your former leader, has been making headlines on the economy today, saying that those who say she crashed the economy are either stupid or malevolent. Is Liz Truss somebody that you're proud to have in your party, or is she somebody that you wish would go away?
Wow.
So I've just said that there's too much blue on blue, that we need to, and I implied that we need to rally around the Prime Minister. And that's what I am going to do. And that's what I would encourage all colleagues, including Liz Truss, to do as well. You invite me to say all sorts of things about Liz Truss. I'm not going to, because, again, that just offers more headlines, focusing internally on the debates. That's exactly, I'm afraid, what's preventing our poll ratings from improving.
Right, let's just take that point, because I completely agree with you, and we've a job to do and you've a job to do. But here's what I want to ask you, because I love the fact you're straight, and I mean that. You talk about inflation dropping, you talk about the military, you talk about the Middle East. You talk to me like a Tory politician. I'm being completely honest, and you're right. It's been months of chaotic backstabbing and bitching, right? Have you got the time as a party to get the message across and make a difference? Because it seems, with respect, that whatever happens, there is this sort of, we've had 14 years and they're a busted flush. That's the challenge, isn't it, Tobias?
It is. I mean, firstly, there's the bigger perspective. Don't forget, we came in back in 2010 when that note was left in the Treasury to say there's no more money left. So it was not a great start that we inherited. We then had two seismic events, generational events of COVID and Ukraine, which have impacted on our economy. That would have affected any government. And Labour tends to sort of, all opposition parties, gloss over that, saying, oh, look at 14 years, look where we are today. we need to then recognise that we are moving into calmer waters. The economy is improving. Business confidence is, coming back. These are all positive things. We're doing well compared with other G7 nations. If we allow ourselves to show determination and vigour that we want to remain in number 10, rather than arguing them with each other, we'll have a far better chance of succeeding at the next general election. Unfortunately, too much of the distractions, too much of the debates with you as well, because I know you enjoy talking about these things, are not all the things that are actually going to get us re-elected. They're the things that are actually going to put the electorate off from voting Conservative.
But that's the argument, isn't it? Is that what some figures within the Tory party have said, and I totally respect your answer there, Tobias. You appreciate we have a job to do. We have to put these things to you.
It was a good answer.
I also understand that for somebody who was a former Prime Minister to keep trying to grab those headlines, it in itself distracts from the work that the current leadership are trying to do.
I'm going to say to my local MP, and I didn't know until the other day, to me, people like you are absolutely right in the way you do it. And you're right, that the Tory party seems to have been dragged down by this bitter infighting, and I'm not quite sure. What frightens me is that I look at Sunak and Starmer and I see the Labour Party. They not only have parked their tanks on your lawn, Tobias, they've driven right over you. It's extraordinary that we spend our time to... I'm old enough to remember what happened, and Labour might be fantastic. In fact, the job Starmer's done from Corbyn is totally respectful. But I think people have to be aware of what could happen. That's all I'm saying. But I want the Tory party, in a robust way, to be talking like you're talking and not bitching about each other.
Quick question, Tobias. You mentioned there the benefits of not having infighting within your own party in order to kind of progress our politics and the situation that the country's in. Would you also stand against fighting and name-calling to the Labour Party and want to move, I suppose, in more of a coalition, particularly in a time of war?
I have a genuine concern of where British politics is going as a whole. The shoulders that we stand on in the past. Why is Britain great? A couple hundred years of real, amazing characters, relinquishing their roles in the economy, in military, in industry and so forth, becoming members of parliament, then becoming cabinet members and great parliamentarians and political leaders. If we want the next generation to then come in, step in our shoes, lead Britain into the future, then it must be seen as an attractive place to work. And some of the infighting that goes on, some of the sensationalism that takes place, deters people.
Absolutely.
Deters the best.
And Tobias, I'm so sorry.
It's
not a personal attack, but we have run out of time, unfortunately. We love having you on the show.
I look
Tobias
forward
Ellwood
to the leaflets, Mr. Ellwood.